let's talk about the mistake that you're likely making on mistakes, the topic of mistakes. So when you make a mistake on the trumpet, that is a necessary action for growth. It's necessary to make mistakes because that's how you learn anything, through some version of trial and error. The issue that a lot of trumpet players run into is that they make the same mistakes. You see, when you make a mistake and you figure out the solution, but you keep making the mistake, that's a problem. It just means that you're not really learning. You're not taking the lesson from the mistake. So let me give you an example. If you're playing a middle C and you can in fact play that middle C with a clear tone, with a good response, with good articulation, with a clear, beautiful quality, it resonates, and you've been able to do that at some point, well, you know how to do that, especially if you get that more often than not. And sometimes, though, you crack it, or you make a mistake on the note. And so the reason you keep making those mistakes is because you keep reinforcing those mistakes. So there are categories of mistakes. There are the mistakes that you're going to make because you don't know any better, right? You're exploring. There's something difficult that you've never been able to do. Like, let's say your range goes up to a high C. You've never hit a C sharp in your life. Well, of course, you're going to make mistakes going up to the C sharp because you still have to discover what you need to do to get there. And so those mistakes are a lot more forgivable. In fact, you kind of have to go for them and try to figure it out. But when you do find the solution, when you go from 0 to 1, you finally hit that C sharp and you know what it feels like, then it's your job to go from 1 to 2. And it might take some time to get there because it's still very unfamiliar to your muscle memory, but eventually you do. And then it gets faster, right? You go from 2 to 4 much quicker, from 4 to 8 much quicker, from 8 to 16 much quicker, right? And it just goes on and like that. But that process only happens if you're careful. And a lot of trumpet players aren't careful. This is what I see most trumpet players do. They'll make a mistake, 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 they'll make 9 mistakes. Then finally, on the 10th try, they make one good one. What good is that? And then they stop, by the way. They stop. They're like, cool, good job, man. And they move on to the next thing. If you were a gambling man, would you bet on those odds? No, because it's 1 in 10. You wouldn't bet your house on that. Of course not. And so why are you betting your trumpet playing on that? That's what most trumpet players do. But they also do, even if they're better than that and they've graduated on a little bit from that, they'll go, I made a mistake, let's say they make 5 mistakes in a row, then they fix it 5 times in a row and they're like, yeah, I've got it, it's nailed. I just did it 5 times in a row after all. But they forget that before that, they messed it up 5 times in a row. So what do those odds look like? That's a coin toss, my friend, 50-50. That's not going to do you anything either. You might as well not have practiced. I mean, the only thing you got in was maybe a little bit of a workout, I guess, but you didn't improve. You have to stack the odds in your favor when you practice. So it's not enough to have a 50-50. It has to be overwhelming odds. You've probably heard the very classic advice, don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. It's exactly that. And the reason that trumpet players don't do that is for 2 reasons. 1, discipline, laziness, that sort of thing. I'm not casting stones, okay? I've done the same thing. So just so we're clear there. I get it. But that's one thing. The other thing is the limitation of the chop. So sometimes, especially when we're practicing power, endurance, range, it can be difficult to stack the odds in our favor because you start to get tired. And then once you start to get tired, you start making mistakes because of that, which is why you need to be careful when you practice this instrument. You need to do it in a way that's methodical, systematic, because if you don't, you just you're just going to get into trouble. You're going to get tired before you can stack the odds in your favor, and then it's game over. So if you want to stack the odds in your favor, which is the question you might be asking yourself now, well, how do I do this if I keep getting tired? Start with little things. Fix the smallest possible problem that you can in a register and volume that you're comfortable with so that you can do it more often. After all, if you're cracking, let's say, all your high notes, don't worry about those right now. There's a order to the mistakes, right? A hierarchy of mistakes. And maybe for you, it's not time to tackle those higher order mistakes because there's just too many of them or they're too big. Now you can, right? You can pick one big mistake and start working at it, but again, not if you can't actually achieve a proper ratio and stack the odds in your favor. So start with something small. Start with something in the middle register. And it can, in the middle register and something soft, you can still do something that is actually a high order mistake, like cracking a note. That's a pretty big mistake, right? I would put that on the top of the totem pole of mistakes because after all, if you don't respond in time, then you're playing the wrong note, right? Even if it's the right note in the wrong time, it's the wrong note. So fixing response is huge because it affects the rest of the chain of your trumpet playing. Everything that comes afterwards is irrelevant if you crack the first note, right? So you need to get that initial attack to work for a lot of the rest of the mechanism to work. So response is huge. So how do you work on it? Well, start with one note. Just play a G. Can you get that G to respond every single time? I know you've played Gs that when it hits perfect. The sound is beautiful. It's in tune. You've done it before. You know you've done it before. So now it's your job to make sure it happens every single time. And that just takes time. But if you do it, if you actually do it, you will see outsized returns in your trumpet playing. Even if it takes you 20 minutes on that one G to do it, I promise you it's worth it because now you're actually solving a problem instead of just arbitrarily playing through exercises and having a random reinforcement mechanism, right? You're actually reinforcing the proper response, sound, intonation, comfort, whatever it is that you're trying to improve on that note, and you're making sure that it's reliable. That's worth its weight in gold. It's worth more than 10 hours of practice that are completely mindless. Just that 20 or 30 minutes solid, even if it's just one tiny little problem like that. So, and the reason, again, is because if you actually solve it, then that one G is not going to be an issue for you anymore. So you can move on to other problems instead of what a lot of trumpet players do is play whack-a-mole with every single mistake that they have. They think they fixed the G, but they didn't reinforce it enough times to actually stack the odds in their favor. So then they play an F sharp, and then all of a sudden they start trying to fix that, and then they're like, cool, I fixed that, but then they play a G again, and then the G isn't working anymore. So then they have to start fixing the G, and then they play the F sharp again. And now that's not working. So then they start fixing that, right? I'm using simple examples here for a reason, right? So that we can follow along with what's happening. But if you want a more complicated example, it's like you work on lip slurs one day, you think you fixed it, and then the next day you work on articulation, you think you fixed that, you go back to lip slurs, all of a sudden your lip slurs don't work. You go back to articulation, all of a sudden that doesn't work, right? You actually have to solve these problems, and the only way is through overwhelming odds. Overwhelming odds in your favor, and it would look like this. Let's go back to the simple G analogy. You get it wrong, you get it right. You get it wrong, you get it right. You get it wrong, you get it right. You're at a 50-50. Cool. You're not that far away. You get it right, you get it right, you get it right. You get it wrong, you get it right, you get it right, you get it right. Count this, like count them out. You see how if I don't count it, I'm like, what are the odds? I have no idea. I don't know. But if you write it down, you'll be able to see on paper and then pick a set of odds that you're happy with for that exercise. And you can do this with anything. You just need a piece of paper. Stack the odds in your favor, my friend, and don't make the mistake of remaking unnecessary mistakes, because you actually have the power to fix them clearly, because you already have played it correctly. You just need to reinforce it enough times so that your body knows that that's what you want. You have to understand, muscle memory is stupid. It's smart in one way, that it allows our subconscious to do amazing things without paying attention to what it is, right? I could play the trumpet in my sleep. Why? Because of the muscle memory. But it's only as good as what I program into it. If I feed it beautiful G's all the time, then that's all my muscle memory knows. If I feed it garbage G's every once in a while because I don't sift through them, because I don't correct it when it happens, because I just let it go, because I'm like, whatever, it'll fix itself. It will not fix itself. You have to fix it. And the second you understand that you have the power to fix these problems, as long as you're paying attention to know that it's a problem and just hyper focus on it so that you don't do it again, you will see amazing returns in your trumpet playing, my friend. I hope it helps.